Hello, welcome to Project Risk Management. How do we apply risk management in a pragmatic way? The best way to apply risk management is to think about risks as being an everyday uncertainty that could affect your objective for the day. In the same way, on your projects, risk could affect your project. The uncertainty of an event, a negative event or a positive event that could impact your project in either a positive or a negative way. The best way to manage risks is to have a risk register. It's not enough to say, oh, the risks are in my head. You do need a register. Put together a risk register. As you can see from the templates we've provided, a risk register is simply a list of your risks, which have the probability and impact ratings, as well as the rating of the overall risk. Is it high, medium, or low when you combine the probability and the impact to give you a risk score? Is it high, medium, or low, and what are you going to do about it, and who's going to take action if that risk occurs, or who's going to take action to minimize the risk before it even occurs? So to apply it in a pragmatic way, the first process, plan risk management. You need a plan. You need a plan for how to manage risks, not just in the organization, but on every single project. On your current project, how have you decided to manage risks? Are you meeting with a team? Are you updating the risk register? Who is updating the risk register? How often? And what are you doing about new risks that you find along the project? So develop a strategy. That is what plan risk management is all about. It doesn't have to be a whole binder full of papers. It could be a one-pager, a half-pager, but at least you've got a plan on how to manage risks, about the frequency of meeting with the team, about what risk management strategies, tools, and techniques you will apply. You don't have to use every single one of them, but be intentional about which ones you're going to use. Be deliberate about which ones you're going to use. After you have planned risk management and you have a risk management plan, then you begin to execute the plan. You identify risks. You could use brainstorming techniques. You could put the team into a room and begin to brainstorm about possible risks, or maybe you use a Delphi technique, an anonymous survey of sorts, get the information back, put it in the risk register, maybe analyze it further with the team after all is said and done. But ultimately, you want a risk register which takes into account risks that have happened in the past and risks that could happen in the future. Put all that information together and go with the risk register and keep monitoring it. Keep on controlling those risks until you get to the end of the project. So that's really the use of the risk register. It has all your risks and it has all your plans of what you're going to do in the future. But after you've identified risks, you also need to carry out a qualitative risk analysis. And this is where you actually assess the risk score. This is where you actually assess the high, medium, low nature of the risks. After you've done that, you prioritize the risks, because you're not going to do every single one of them. Some of the risks are going to be put on a watch list. Some of the risks you're actually going to spend more time and more money to either get rid of the risks or to mitigate or to transfer the risks. And that takes us to our next process, quantitative risk analysis. In the perform quantitative risk analysis process, we are very deliberate about finding the aggregate effect of all of the risks on the project. So we're really adding up the effect of all of the risks. It could be in terms of dollars, in terms of days, but we're coming to an understanding of the aggregate impact on the whole project. In some instances, some managers say, I didn't know that this project was that risky, let's shut it down, we're not going to do it. That could be a way you tackle possible risks on a project. Before you even start working on the project proper, you've taken a look at the risks and you're like, no, this is way too much. We call that risk appetite. Maybe your company has low tolerance for risks or hardly any risk appetite. Let's talk about the next process. It's called plan risk responses. In plan risk responses, you should sit down with your team and ask them, how do you think we should counteract these risks? Now remember, every well-documented risk in the risk register should have a cause, a risk, and an effect. You don't just talk about a risk being, resource risk. That's not enough. We need to ask ourselves, what is the reason for the resource risk? What is the resource risk, and what is the effect of the resource risk on the project should it happen? And then you begin to ask yourself, how do you minimize it? How do you avoid it? And so on. And you do that in the plan risk responses process. So in plan risk responses, you're coming out with responses to all of these risks. The final process here is control risks. In control risks, you're taking the risk register and the risk management plan and all of the other information that's relevant, and you are controlling the risks to make sure that the risks are exactly where you first of all analyze them to be, and if they have increased, maybe there's an increase in impact, an increase in probability, what do you need to do? You need to update your risk register. So from start to end of the project, you've got your risks, you are monitoring them. If there are any changes, you're going to make modifications as needed, but you're really staying on top of everything happening in risk management. And that's really how to be pragmatic about risk management. Make sure you've got that register. Make sure you've got that risk, but the cause and effect are also important. Maybe your company goes with a high, medium, low. That's all right. Make sure it's in the risk register. Maybe your company goes with a risk score, probability times impact to give you a risk score. Maybe they've got a threshold. But I would advise you to read this particular standard. It's called the PMI Standard for Risk Management. Read it. Understand it. Take a look at it. Ask yourself, what could we do better in our company? What aren't we doing today that we could do better? How can we leverage all this knowledge that we've got? Maybe you've got several PMPs, but you've still got no formal way of managing risks on a project. You need to have a meeting of the minds. You need to sit down and plan. How can we do this better? How can we manage projects more efficiently? With everything we've got in the PMBOK guide, wow, 47 processes in the 5th edition. You've got more than enough to manage any project. The big question is tailoring it to meet all of your needs, the customer's wants and expectations in general. Next, we'll be talking about project procurement management.